Chapter 1. Clean hands in a dirty town. I don't fight. I don't lead. I don't even brag proper. What I do is count. That's rarer in Black Crag than mercy. Most goblins can get to 10 if you let 'em use fingers and toes and a bit of tongue. After that, it turns into lots, then loads, then all of 'em. That's how fortunes get lost and throats get opened. Me? I can count crates, teeth, squigs, debts. I can count past 20 without drooling, past 50 without stabbing someone for slowing me down. That's why they don't laugh too loud when they say my name. Sniv Zibblegrot, Squig broker, ledger keeper, survivor. Black Crag squats under the old world like a rotten tooth under a gum line, all tunnels and fungus rot and damp stone that sweats green. The air tastes like cave gas and old blood. Fungus lanterns hang from iron hooks hammered into rock, puffing dull violet light that makes every goblin look half dead. Cave vents hiss every few minutes, belching fumes that set your eyes watering and your temper short. Down the main artery tunnel, chains rattle where rock squigs chew on iron links like they're stale bread. You hear the crunch. You feel it in your molars. Bitey squigs snap at each other through cage bars, gums slick and purple, teeth clicking like gamblers with a nervous habit. Boingy squigs, mad little rubber balls of hunger, slam themselves against their pen walls in jittery spasms. Snotlings scuttle everywhere, dragging cages too big for them, tripping over their own ears, arguing about whose turn it is to lose a finger. One of mine, Scab, has only 3 left. He keeps count by stumps. My office sits wedged between a fungus drying rack and a pit shaft that drops down to Grub Scab's fighting ring. The walls are layered in parchment scraps nailed flat with bone tacks. Numbers crawl across them in charcoal columns. Transactions, deliveries, losses, a tidy life in a filthy town. That's where the messenger found me. He did knock. Goblins don't knock unless they're on fire. He filled the doorway instead, big, shoulders like quarried rock, nose crooked sideways from an argument it lost. He wore iron plates strapped with leather, studded with teeth that weren't his. He dropped a sack onto my desk. It landed with a heavy, clattering thud. Teeth. The sack split at the seam and spilled a few across my ledger. Orc teeth, goblin teeth, squig teeth, jagged and curved. Payment, or a promise of it. Big job, the brute growled. His breath smelled like fungus beer and something recently deceased. I like big jobs, I said, nudging a tooth back into the pile and counting the spill, without looking like I was counting. Habit. They got big numbers. Boss wants the crown, Squig. I laughed. It came out wrong. Thin. A little wet. Everyone in Black Crag knows the story. A spore pocket fell from the bad moon itself, so the shaman claims, crashed into the upper caverns in a rain of glowing filth. From that rot hatched something wrong. A squig with white eyes like blind fish, gums the color of bruised plums, a jaw that snaps twice, once where you see it, once where you don't. They say it can smell fear through stone. They say it bites in 2 places at once. They say a lot of things. I stopped laughing when I saw the brute wasn't. It's stolen, he said. Then go steal it back. He leaned in. The fungus light slid over scars like pale worms. You find it. I sell squigs, I said carefully. I don't hunt legends. You count, he said. That made my fingers still. Boss says you count better than anyone. Means you notice things. Means you know where stuff goes. I looked at the sack again. A good pile. 43 teeth at least. Maybe more in the bag's gut. And if I don't? I asked. He showed me his hands. Big hands. Missing one finger, fresh scab at the base, then we count your fingers instead. He left the sack, and the threat when the brute's footsteps faded into the tunnel roar. I closed the door and counted the teeth properly. 79. An advance. Too much for a rumor, too little for a lie. The crown squig. Stolen, which meant somebody brave, stupid, or organized had reached into the deepest pens under Black Crag and pulled out something that bites twice. That wasn't random theft. That was planning. I stayed late, pretending to audit feed tallies while my mind ran numbers that didn't sit right. Grub Scab the Pit King funded half the tribe's raids with his arena. The night goblin shaman had been raving about bad moon omens for weeks. The snotling handlers were grumbling about missing hazard mushroom rations. Pieces. Nothing fitting. When I finally locked my ledgers and stepped into the alley tunnels, the gas vents were hissing low and mean. Most of Black Crag was drinking or bleeding by then. I didn't hear them. That's what bothered me after. No scuffle, no shout, just a cloth over my mouth that smelled like bitter root and old mushrooms. A sting at the back of my skull. Darkness. I woke up sitting upright, hands free. That's how you know it's serious. The room was dry. Too dry for most of Black Crag. The walls had been scraped clean of mold. A single fungus lantern hung overhead, trimmed neat, its glow steady and white instead of the usual sickly purple. Across from me sat a goblin in dark silk robes. Clean. That's the first thing you noticed. His hands rested on his knees, long fingers folded neatly. No dirt under the nails, no scars, no fungus stains. In Black Crag, clean hands mean one of two things. You're new, or you don't do your own killing. Sniv Zibblegrot, he said pleasantly. You count well. His voice was soft. Careful. It didn't rasp or snarl. It slipped. I try, I said. You do more than try. You succeed. He smiled. It wasn't wide. It didn't show teeth. That made it worse. I don't recognize you, I said. No, he agreed. You wouldn't. There were whispers around him. Not sound, exactly. A feeling. Like the air behind him was thinner. I'd heard of such things. Clan Eshin sent agents into the mountains sometimes. Rat things in the dark. Quick knives. Quiet deals. This goblin wasn't a rat, but something about him leaned in that direction. You've been offered a job, he said. Find the crown squig. News travels. It does when one pays for it. He tilted his head slightly. The crown squig was stolen, he continued, but not how you think. I said nothing. It was stolen once, weeks ago, quietly, replaced with another squig of similar mass and temperament. The current theft is theater. The fungus lantern hummed faintly. Why stage a theft? I asked. To create urgency. To move pieces. Pieces where? Into the arena. Tomorrow night. My stomach tightened. Grubscab's pits would be packed. Warbosses from 3 tunnels over. Champions. Shamans. Snotlings with betting boards. A demonstration, the clean goblin said softly. The crown squig released during the final bout. Accidents happen in the pits, I muttered. Yes, he agreed. But this will not be an accident. He leaned forward. The crown squig has been trained. Squigs don't train. They do, he said gently. If you know what rhythm they listen for. He lifted his fingers and tapped them lightly against his knee. Click, 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 click. It wasn't loud, but it had pattern. My skin prickled. They conditioned it to respond to a sequence, he said. A soft clicking rhythm. Structured, precise. I swallowed. You're guessing? I said. I am not. His eyes were steady. Dark, too steady. They began with simple patterns. 1, 2, 3. Repetition, reinforcement, reward, punishment. Over weeks, they built complexity. Squigs ain't smart enough for that. They don't need to be, he replied. They need only to associate rhythm with meat. He tapped again. Click, click. Pause. Click. Certain sequences guide its attention. Others agitate. One particular pattern directs aggression toward the source. My mouth felt dry. And who, I asked carefully, can make such patterns? He smiled again. Small, knife-thin. Very few goblins in Black Crag can count past 10 without error. He let that sit. You, he said, can. The lantern hummed. Somewhere beyond the walls, a distant squig shrieked. You're wrong, I said. Plenty can count. He tilted his head. Past 20? Silence. Past 50? My pulse thudded in my ears. What do you want? I asked. The current theft is staged, he said calmly. The crown squig is being held beneath the old fungus-drying chambers. It will be moved tomorrow, hidden among standard pit beasts. And when the time is right, someone in the arena will click. He paused, and the crown squig will not bite a champion. Who then? A war boss. The word hung heavy. If the war boss falls in the arena, he continued, before the assembled tribes, power shifts, chaos erupts, blame scatters. And you? I asked. I prefer stability. That almost made me laugh. In Goblin Town, controlled instability, he corrected. Predictable, profitable. So you want me to what? Stop it? He regarded me. I want you to help me steal it. Again, my throat tightened. Before the arena opens, he went on, we remove the crown squig from play, replace it with something less revolutionary. And then the war boss survives. The conspirators are exposed in the confusion. Black Crag stabilizes under guidance. Your guidance? He didn't answer. And if I say no? I asked. His hands remained folded. Then the crown squig appears tomorrow, he said. And when it responds to a counting rhythm in the arena, certain observers will note who in Black Crag is known for counting. My stomach dropped. You wouldn't. I would not need to, he said softly. Whispers would do the rest. Heled det sinking. You are already being paid to find it, he added. If the squig kills a war boss, who better to blame than the broker who knew where all beasts are kept? My mind raced through tunnels and names and debts. You're threatening me, I said. I am offering partnership. That's not partnership. It is, he said mildly. You may choose the side that survives. Silence stretched between us. In the distance, I thought I heard it. Click, click, click. Maybe memory. Maybe imagination. The crown squig. Trained. A weapon you could aim without chains. And if I help you, I said slowly, and we steal it, then you live, he said simply. And Black Crag remains negotiable. I looked at his hands again. Clean. Not a stain on them. But somewhere in the tunnels, something had been taught to kill at the sound of numbers, and I was the only goblin in this filthy, stabbing, fungus-choked hole who could count well enough to pull its leash. I always thought numbers were safe. Quiet things, harmless scratches on parchment. I was wrong. This wasn't about a rare beast. It wasn't about pits. It wasn't even about the bad moon and its rotten omens. It was about who'd be standing when dawn's fungus light crept over Black Crag, and in this town, Power doesn't change hands peacefully. It changes with teeth. And tomorrow night, something with 2 bites was going to choose the future, unless I did first. Chapter 2. Teeth, teeth everywhere. Grubscub's pits squatted under Black Crag like a wound that never scabbed over. You could smell it long before you saw it, the iron stink of old blood soaked into stone, the sour tang of fungus beer spilled and trampled, the hot animal reek of squigs penned too close together. The tunnels leading down were slick with grease and boot filth. Whoever built the place had done it with the sort of crude genius goblins reserve for 2 things: killing and making sure you pay to watch. I went alone, not because I was brave, because goblins with friends get betrayed louder. The entrance was a jagged archway reinforced with welded scrap and femurs. Squig skulls hung from chains, clacking together in the updraft like bad teeth in a cold mouth. 2 doormen, broad goblins with cudgels checked blades at the door. Not for safety, for monopoly. If you wanted someone stabbed, Grubscab wanted his cut. I showed them a stamped tooth token, still sticky from the messenger's sack. It bought me a nod and a shove. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew. The pit was carved into a wide bowl, tiers of stone benches spiraling down toward the arena floor. Fungus lanterns burned in cages overhead, their light tinted red with smeared blood mold. Every face looked bruised in that glow. The crowd was a heaving patchwork of goblins, snotlings, a few hulking hobgoblins from some eastern caravan, and 1 or 2 orc lads who'd wandered in to gamble and bully. Goblins love 3 things: violence, bargains, and feeling cleverer than someone else. The pits gave them all at once. Down below, handlers dragged in cages. Squigs slammed their bodies against iron bars, jaws snapping, tongues lolling like wet rope. The crowd roared and spat wagers. Teeth changed hands constantly, currency you could bite to confirm it was real. I kept my head low and my eyes busy. Counting isn't just numbers. It's noticing. It's knowing what looks wrong. Grubscab's pit guards strutted the perimeter, thick-armed brutes with leather aprons and hooked poles. Their job was to keep fighters inside and spectators from leaning too far in. Their other job was to make sure any squig that escaped got encouraged into the crowd, not back toward Grubscab's private box. And Grubscab's box was the first thing I looked for. It hung above the arena like a parasite, a scaffold of chained timber and iron plates, draped in rag banners. 2 squig-headed idols flanked it, their mouths stuffed with offerings, teeth, coins, and 1 severed finger that still wore a ring. Grubscab himself sat in the middle on a throne made of broken cages. He was huge for a goblin. Thick neck, broken nose, crown of pit squig fangs stitched into a leather band. He laughed with his whole body, like it hurt not to. When he laughed, someone below bled. A fight started. 2 goblin champions with jagged cleavers, faces painted in mud and ash. They circled, feinted, hacked, and within moments 1 slipped in a puddle that had been deliberately poured where his foot would land. He went down hard. The other champion didn't even hesitate. 1 clean chop and the loser's head popped sideways, hanging by sinew. The crowd went mad. Too mad. Goblins love mess. A good fight is teeth flying, limbs flailing, someone biting someone else's ear off and swallowing it mid-swing. This had been neat, efficient, like it was meant to end quick. I watched the winner. His eyes flicked up once, just once, to Grubscab's box. Not with triumph, with confirmation. Then he raised his cleaver for the crowd and strutted off. Already paid. The next bout was Squig's. 2 bitey squigs hauled into the arena on chains. Their handlers yanked them into position and scrambled back before they got mistaken for the meal. The squig snapped, squealing, bodies jittering with hunger. The crowd leaned forward, breath held, as if they were witnessing art. Then something strange happened. The larger squig, red-eyed, scarred muzzle, teeth chipped from chewing, iron paused. Its head tilted. It wasn't looking at its opponent. It was listening. I felt my spine tighten. The squig turned slightly toward the benches, toward the crowd, as if it could hear something the rest of us couldn't. And then there, a sound, almost lost in the roar, a faint clicking rhythm, not loud, not obvious, the kind of noise a gambler might make with a tongue against teeth while thinking. Click, 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 pause, click. The squig's whole body tensed like a spring. It ignored the other squig entirely. Its white-flecked eyes locked onto a spot in the third tier of benches just below a fungus lantern where shadows pooled. Then it lunged sideways, yanking its chain taut, dragging its handler 2 steps before the handler slammed the pole hook into its ribs and cursed. The crowd laughed, thinking it was just a squig being a squig, but I wasn't laughing, because it wasn't random. It was directed. And I'd heard that pattern before. My throat went dry. I forced myself to look where the squig had looked. Goblins packed together shoulder to shoulder, faces smeared in dirt and bile, no one standing out, except a figure sitting very still, not cheering, not betting, just watching. I caught a glimpse of hands, clean hands. My gut tightened. Not him. Not here. Not in this open mess. The squig fight continued, devolving into the usual blur of snapping jaws and torn flesh. One squig got its throat opened, blood spraying in a warm arc over the first row. The crowd howled, delighted. Someone scooped up a fallen tooth like it was a lucky charm. I kept my eyes moving. Too many odd endings. Too many accidents that looked staged. Too many fights that ended with one clean, decisive cut instead of the normal chaos. Fixing fights. Grubscub wasn't just running a pit. He was running a machine, and machines need signals. I slid along the benches, letting the crowd's motion swallow me. A snotling shoved past with a tray of fungus beer cups, spilling half of it onto someone's lap and getting slapped for it. I followed the snotling down an access tunnel toward the handler's area behind the arena. The guards at the rope barrier barely looked at me. They knew me by scent, if not face-broker stink, ledger dust, the reek of someone who sells monsters but doesn't bleed for it. Behind the arena, the sound changed. Less roar, more metal. Chains, cages, the wet slap of meat dragged across stone. Handlers cursed at squigs in that tender goblin way, threats and endearments mixed together because goblins can't tell the difference. Snotlings scurried underfoot like pale rats, hauling feed buckets and scraping blood into gutters. Their eyes were wide, their hands shook. One carried a sack that twitched faintly, as if something inside wanted out. I grabbed him by the ear. He yelped, dropping the sack. It hit the ground with a soft squelch. "What's in there?" I asked. "Teeth," he squealed. "Teeth for bettin'. Don't take me, teeth." I didn't take his teeth. Yet I flipped him around so he faced me. His nose was running. His head was shaved in patchy lines where someone had tried to carve a symbol and given up. "What's the hazard allowance?" I asked. He blinked. "What? Hazard mushroom allowance," I said slowly, like explaining arithmetic to a squig. "How much grubscab paying you lot for working near the cages?" His eyes darted. He made a little choking sound that might have been laughter or terror. "None," he squeaked. We gets yelled at." I let go of his ear, and he nearly fell over. "There's talk," I said, "about a stoppage." He looked horrified. "No stoppage. If stoppage, Grubscab feeds us to jumpy squigs. So you'll keep hauling cages for nothing?" He hesitated. That hesitation was worth a lot of teeth. I reached into my pouch and pulled out a small bundle, 6 goblin teeth, still clean, wrapped in cloth. A bribe, a tiny investment. I held it so he could see it, but not grab it. "This is for information," I said, "not for courage, just for words." His tongue flicked over his gums. He stared at the teeth like they were holy. "What words?" he whispered. "Crown Squig," I said. The snotling's face went pale, which is hard when you're already the color of mold. He glanced around fast. Cages, chains, no one close. Then he leaned in. "Not here," he whispered. "Not in pits." I felt my pulse shift. "Where then?" I asked. He swallowed, eyes watering. "Down," he said, pointing with a shaking finger. "Old fungus dry room, under old mine, where bad runes is. Who told you?" He shook his head violently. "No told. We sees. Sometimes we takes feed down, and we hears clicking." My stomach tightened again. "Who goes down there?" I asked. He chewed his lip. "Shaman," he whispered. "Moon-mad one, hood and chains, always muttering. Says Squig is omen, says bad moon spits it out special. Night goblin shaman." Of course, they were always talking about omens, always carving symbols into things that didn't ask for symbols. They'd sacrifice a perfectly good snotling just to watch the blood run in a pattern they could pretend meant something. But the fixer had said this wasn't magic. This was training, conditioning, counting. The shaman might be involved. Sure, they always were. But shamans weren't organized. They were loud chaos in a robe. Useful, but never the hand on the knife's handle, more the knife's screaming decoration. I loosened my grip on the bribe. The snotling snatched the teeth and shoved them into his mouth pouch like a squirrel hiding nuts. "Tell your friends," I said quietly. "Hazard mushroom allowance is coming." He stared at me. "It better," he whispered, almost reverent. "We deserves hazard mushrooms." "You do," I said. "And if anyone asks, you never saw me." He nodded so fast his ears flapped. I turned away, walking deeper into the handler's warren. That was when I felt it. That prickle between the shoulder blades. The sense that the dark behind you has become interested. Not just present intent. I moved slower, like I belonged. Like I wasn't suddenly a goblin with a target painted on his ledger. The tunnels behind the arena twisted into older stone rougher cuts, abandoned supports. Mine timbers bowed and cracked. The air grew colder, less blood stink, more damp rot. Fungus here grew in fat shelves, pale and slick, clinging to walls like diseased tongues. I heard footsteps, not the clumsy slap of snotlings, not the heavy stomp of pit guards. Light, measured, I kept walking. Didn't look back. Know our rule 1. If you look back, you give the shadow a face. And once it has a face, it has a plan. I turned down a side passage that led past a collapsed shaft. Rubble lay piled like bones. A single fungus lantern burned in a cracked alcove, its light dim and watery. My shadow stretched long, and then click, 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 pause, click. The sound slid through the tunnel, soft as breath. Every hair on my arm stood up. I stopped walking. So did the footsteps behind me. Silence pressed in, heavy and wet. Then another click, closer this time, not loud, deliberate, like someone practicing, like someone counting without words. I swallowed and kept my voice steady. "You following me?" I said. "That's rude." No answer, just the faint rustle of cloth, a shift of weight on stone. I kept my hands away from my knife, not because I didn't want it, because I knew what knives did in this town. They escalated things, and I wasn't sure who was behind me, but I was sure of one thing. If they were clicking, they weren't here to rob me. They were here to steer something. I forced myself to breathe slow, and in my mind, numbers ticked forward in a line I couldn't stop. One night, one arena, one squig that listened to counting like it was prayer. Someone wanted the pits to be a stage for a slaughter, and now someone wanted me to know I was being watched. A final click echoed sharp and satisfied like a closing latch. The footsteps retreated, light and quiet, swallowed by the old tunnels. I stood alone under the weak fungus light, heart hammering, skin cold, teeth everywhere, in sacks and crowns and grins. But the sharpest teeth in Black Crag weren't in mouths. They were in plans, and someone had just sharpened theirs on me. Chapter 3. The Counting Game. The old mine didn't want visitors. You could tell by the way the air changed the moment you crossed into it, how the damp turned cold and stale, like breath held too long. The stone here wasn't worked clean like the newer tunnels under Black Crag. It was torn open, hacked at in a hurry, then abandoned when whatever they'd been digging for stopped being worth the blood. Support beams sagged like broken ribs. Rusted iron spikes jutted out of walls where lantern hooks used to hang. The floor was a mess of grit and splintered timber, with puddles that reflected fungus light in dull, dead smears. And in the quiet, you could hear the mine settling, not loud, just a constant, tiny groan, as if the mountain itself was grinding its teeth. I kept moving because stopping in Black Crag is how you die. You pause, you think, you breathe too loud, then someone decides your lungs are worth a tooth token. The clicking from the tunnel behind the pits had followed me into my dreams, even when I was awake. It wasn't just a sound now. It was a hook in my skull, tugging me toward places I didn't want to go. I told myself I was going to check the fungus drying chambers, confirm the snotling's story, get proof, bring it to the clean-handed fixer, or use it as leverage, or Sigmar help me maybe run. But you can't run in Black Crag. There's always another tunnel, another choke point, another goblin who knows your name and your debts. So I went down. The passage narrowed into a throat of rock. The fungus here was pale and slick, growing in thin sheets that clung to the stone like scabbed skin. My boots squelched in mud that smelled faintly sweet, the way rot sometimes does when it's fresh. Bad moon glow mold, so they said. Moon stuff, omen filth, whatever you called it. It lit the way without needing lanterns, and that alone made my stomach twist. Natural fungus light was soft and uneven. This glow was too steady, too bright, like it wanted you to see. The first glyph was on a support beam, a crude crescent with jagged teeth carved into it, smeared with luminous mold so it gleamed like a wound in the dark. I stopped and stared. It hadn't been there yesterday. The timber was old, blackened by damp and time, yet the carving was fresh, edges sharp. Someone had cut it recently. The glow mold was wet, still spreading. Whoever painted it hadn't just wanted a symbol. They'd wanted a sign, something to mark territory, or to guide someone. I moved on, keeping my breathing shallow, my ears wide. The mine twisted downward in a spiral that felt too deliberate. Old tracks for minecarts ran along the floor, half buried under rubble. Every few yards, another glyph appeared. Bad moon crescents, jagged eyes, spirals that looked like teeth falling into a mouth. Glow mold crawled across them, making them pulse faintly, alive in the dark. The deeper I went, the less I heard of Black Crag above. No drunken brawling, no distant arena roar, no Squig shrieks echoing from cages. Just drip, drip, drip from somewhere unseen, and the faint rattle of my own bones inside my skin. Then I heard it again. Click, click, click. Pause. Click. It was close. Not behind me this time. Ahead? My stomach clenched hard enough to hurt. I slowed, letting my steps become careful, quiet. I slid a hand toward my knife, not drawing it, just touching it like a comfort charm. A blade won't stop a plan, but it might by a heartbeat. The tunnel widened into a chamber that used to be a junction, 3 passages branching off, each blocked by collapsed rubble except one, the only clear route leading into deeper black. On the walls, the glow mold was thick as paint, fresh, wet. It coated the stone in curling symbols, layered over older mining marks like someone had come in and rewritten history with fungus and madness. Bad moon glyphs everywhere, and in the middle of the chamber, a cage. Not iron bars like the pits, not sturdy welded scrap. This was something else. Thick woven chains of fungus rope, hardened with resin, looped and knotted into a crude pen. It looked like it had grown rather than been built. The cage door hung open. Something had been dragged out recently. I could see the gouge marks in the stone, long grooves where claws had scrabbled, where teeth had dug in. The smell hit me then. Not just animal, wrong. A sharp, metallic tang mixed with damp rot, like blood left too long in a bowl of mushrooms. I swallowed bile and stepped closer. That's when the rock behind me shifted. A scrape of stone on stone, quiet but unmistakable. I spun, knife half drawn. The passage I'd come through was now blocked, not by a cave-in, by a slab of rock that had been wedged into place. Someone had rolled it across the tunnel mouth with effort and planning. It fit too well, too deliberate. I was trapped. I could have shouted. I could have hammered on the rock. I could have begged. Those were all good ways to die tired. Instead, I breathed, listened, and counted the exits. 1, blocked by rock. 2, collapsed rubble. 3, collapsed rubble. 4, the deep tunnel ahead, the only one still open, the only way forward. The mine didn't want visitors, but it had just made sure I stayed. A low sound rolled out of the dark passage ahead, like a wet sack being dragged over stone. Then another sound, a sniff, long and slow, as if something enormous was tasting the air. My throat tightened. I forced my feet to move. 1 step, then another. The glow mold threw my shadow ahead of me, stretching it long into the black passage like a warning. The tunnel ahead narrowed, then dropped sharply into a sloped shaft. Old support beams framed it, warped and cracked. The glow mold here was thicker, brighter, smeared across the beams in handprints and streaks. Whoever had done it had been generous with their omen, or their camouflage. I slid down carefully, boots scraping grit, knife fully drawn now. The slope ended in a small shaft chamber, where the ceiling hung low and damp. The air was colder here, and the smell of wrong blood was stronger. Then I saw it. It was lying in the center of the chamber, half in shadow, as if it had chosen that spot like a predator chooses a blind corner. At first my eyes didn't know what they were looking at. Squigs are all mouth and muscle and bad intentions, but this one looked like a story made flesh. White eyes, not pale, not milky, white, like polished bone. They reflected the glow mold so cleanly it looked like the creature had lanterns inside its skull. Its gums were purple, deep and bruised, slick with saliva. Its body was squat and powerful, hide mottled with dark blotches that looked almost like old bruises. It had no ears, no nose, just a blunt face and a mouth too big for it, lined with teeth that weren't uniform. They were layered, overlapping, like a jaw built in a hurry by something cruel. And the jaw, Sigmar's rotting hammer, the jaw snapped twice. The first bite was obvious. A massive maw, opening and closing with a wet clap, teeth meeting teeth with a sound like breaking bones. The second bite came a heartbeat later, sideways, slightly offset, as if the creature had a second mouth hidden in its cheek, or as if space itself had hiccuped and repeated the bite somewhere else. Snap, snap. The second bite didn't close on air. It closed on stone, gouging a chunk from the cavern wall beside it, as if the rock were soft bread. My skin went cold. Crown Squig. Real. It lifted its head slowly. Its white eyes found me immediately. Not curious, not hungry, attentive, like it had been waiting for a sound. My mouth went dry. My fingers tightened on the knife handle until the leather creaked. I couldn't fight it. I knew that with the kind of clarity that comes right before you're about to make a bad decision. A goblin knife against that thing was like a toothpick against a war boss. So I did what I always did when I was afraid. I counted. Not out loud. Not at first. Just under my breath. So soft it barely escaped my lips. 1, 2, 3. The words weren't meant for the squig. They were for me. A rhythm to stop my heart from running away. The crown squig's head tilted, its body tensed, every muscle tightening under its hide. Its gums peeled back in a silent grin. It took a step toward me, a slow, deliberate step, like it had all the time in the world. I stopped counting. It stopped moving. My stomach flipped. I stared at it, breath held, mind racing. It wasn't reacting to my fear. It was reacting to the rhythm. I swallowed, then tried again, quieter. 4, 5. The squig's head turned, following the sound like a hunting hound follows a scent. It took another step. Its mouth snapped once, then twice, the second bite carving another divot in the rock beside my boot, too close, too casual, like it was demonstrating. I fell back a half step, nearly tripping. 6, 7. It advanced, not rushing, not lunging, tracking, listening. The sound of my numbers was a leash, and it was tightening around my throat. My mind flashed to the fixer's calm voice, structured counting in sequences, conditioning, reward, punishment. They'd trained it to follow counting like a squig follows meat. And I, Sniv Zibblegrot, ledger keeper, rare goblin who can count past 10, was ringing its dinner bell. I stopped speaking again. Jaw clenched. The crown squig froze, head cocked, saliva dripping from purple gums. It breathed heavy, a wet, rasping inhale that sucked the stink of the chamber toward it. Its white eyes never blinked. I forced myself not to move. The silence stretched. Then, from somewhere above faint, muffled by rock, came another click. Click, click, pause, click. The crown squig twitched. Its head snapped toward the slope shaft behind me, as if the sound had yanked it by the spine. Someone else was here. Someone was clicking, and the squig was listening to them too. My skin prickled with terror and anger, a hot, ugly mix. I'd been cornered on purpose, lured down here like bait. Whoever was behind the clicking wanted to see how it reacted, wanted to see if it worked. The squig took a step toward the slope shaft, then hesitated, torn between the clicks and my presence. Its jaw snapped twice, impatient, ripping a chunk out of the air as if reality itself had offended it. The clicking stopped. The squig turned back to me, its eyes locked on my mouth, waiting. My heart hammered. I realized then, cold, clear, unavoidable, that this wasn't a shaman's omen. This wasn't a bad moon miracle. This was a weapon, a living weapon trained to respond to counting rhythms. And if it could be aimed by clicking, it could be aimed in a crowd, in the pits, with war bosses gathered close. A war boss dais, a packed arena, a moment of silence before a bout, a soft clicking rhythm, a squig that doesn't bite the nearest thing, a squig that bites the source. I felt my stomach drop as the terrifying truth slid into place like a knife into a spine. The crown squig wasn't meant to kill a champion. Champions were disposable, meat for entertainment. War bosses weren't. A war boss dying in the arena wasn't just blood. It was politics. It was a throne shaking. It was 100 knives deciding which way to fall. And only someone who could count cleanly, consistently, could guide the squig without the rhythm wobbling, without the pattern breaking. Only someone who could make the sequence precise enough to cut through the arena noise. Only someone like May. The squig leaned forward slightly, as if it could smell the thought. Its gums flexed. Saliva dripped. My knife felt stupid in my hand. I backed toward the wall, searching for anything, an opening, a crack, a gap in rock. There was none. The chamber was a dead end. The only way out was the slope shaft behind the squig, and it stood between me and it like a fat, grinning doom. Above, faintly, I heard shifting stone, a whisper of movement, someone watching, someone testing. I wanted to shout, to curse, to scream that I wasn't their tool, but shouting would be sound. Sound would be rhythm. Rhythm would be a leash. So I did the only thing I could do. I broke the pattern. I opened my mouth and spat numbers wrong, ugly, jagged like a goblin trying to lie to a ledger. 829511410-3. The crown squig recoiled, confused. Its head jerked. Its body twitched. The white eyes flicked, trying to latch onto something that wasn't there. The wrongness of the sequence hit it like a slap. It snarled a wet, bubbling sound and snapped its jaw twice in rapid anger, the second bite carving a long scar into the stone wall. I kept going. Nonsense numbers, broken cadence, 710-66492. The squig shook its head violently, as if trying to dislodge the sound from its skull. It took a step toward me, then stopped, then stepped again, uncertain. Its training was tugging it one way, my chaotic counting yanking it another. Above, a faint hiss, someone inhaling sharply. I'd ruined their test. Good. The crown squig lunged suddenly, a blur of muscle. My body moved before my mind did. I threw myself sideways, slamming shoulder first into the cavern wall. The squig's first bite snapped shut where my head had been. The second bite tore a chunk out of the stone beside me, showering grit and glow mold. The shock of it rattled my teeth. I rolled, scrambled, and saw it just for a heartbeat, the slope shaft behind it, the only escape route. I needed it to move. I needed it to turn. I needed... Click from above again. Closer. Click, click. Pause. Click. The crown squig's head snapped toward the slope shaft instantly, as if yanked by invisible string. It turned, body pivoting, jaws snapping twice in eager anticipation. It moved, just enough. I didn't think. Thinking is slow. I sprinted past its flank, close enough to smell its breath, hot and metallic, like rusted knives left in blood. It snapped at me once, missing by inches. The second bite tore at the air beside my ribs, as if the chamber itself was trying to chew me. I hit the slope shaft and clawed upward, boots slipping in grit. My fingers dug into old timber supports, splinters stabbing my palms. Behind me, I heard it scraping, heavy, the crown squig following, driven by the clicks above. The clicking stopped suddenly. The squig hesitated. So did I, frozen mid-climb. For one awful second, everything was silent except my ragged breath and the wet drip of saliva below. Then, very softly, from somewhere above and behind, a voice, not loud, not rough, careful, amused. "Count proper," it whispered. My blood turned to ice, because I knew that voice, and because the words weren't advice, they were a command. The crown squig snarled and surged upward, and I understood, in that heartbeat of pure terror, that I wasn't just the perfect trigger. I was the perfect scapegoat, and someone in Black Crag had just decided my numbers belonged to them. Chapter 4. A polite knife. I made it back to the lived-in tunnels with splinters in my palms, glow mold dust in my hair, and the taste of panic thick on my tongue. The mine had tried to swallow me. Someone had helped it. By the time I reached the old fungus-drying corridor, where the stone stops sweating and starts remembering, I knew 3 things for certain. 1. The crown squig was real. 2. It listened to counting like a priest listens to prayer. 3. Whoever was clicking wanted to see whether I would run, scream, or obey. I'd done all 3, in my own way. Black Crag above was loud again. Familiar filth. The distant roar of the pits, the clatter of cages, the slap of snottling feet on wet stone. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. All the noise did was hide knives. I didn't go back to my office. That was the first place they'd look for me, pit brutes, shamans' goons, and the clean-handed fixers' shadow men. I took side tunnels, doubled back, crossed over a gas vent that hissed yellow and hot enough to peel skin. I slipped through a mushroom farm where snotlings tended fat caps with little bone rakes, humming tunelessly, eyes empty as boiled eggs. Everywhere I went, I felt watched, not with eyes, with intention, like the tunnels themselves were counting my steps. I hadn't decided to confront the fixer, not in a noble, brave way. I'd simply run out of places that didn't lead back to him. He'd already gotten to me once without leaving bruises. That meant he could do it again any time he pleased. If he wanted me dead, I'd be dead and wouldn't know it until I was counting teeth in the afterlife. No, if I was going to survive, I needed the truth, the whole shape of the plan, the numbers behind it, and there was only one creature in Black Crag who liked numbers as much as I did. I found the door by the smell. Not blood or rot, those were everywhere. This was something else. Resin, oil, clean cloth. A scent like a place where violence had been planned in advance instead of improvised. A narrow passage split off behind an abandoned cage repair station, where a few rusted hooks still hung like dead fingers. The passage ended at a slab of dark timber reinforced with iron bands. No squig skulls, no teeth talismans, no graffiti. No goblin made a door like this unless they wanted it unnoticed. I knocked once, then, because I wasn't an idiot, I knocked again. A different rhythm, spaced out irregular so no one could mistake it for counting. A slit opened at eye level. Darkness behind it. A voice, soft as felt. Sniv. Not a question. Not surprise. I swallowed hard. Open. The slit closed. A breath later, the door unlatched without a sound and swung inward. I stepped into a room that felt wrong for Black Crag. The floor had been swept. The walls were scrubbed clean of mold. A lantern burned with a steady, pale flame that didn't gutter in the damp. It wasn't fungus light. It was oil. The clean-handed fixer sat at a low table again, dark silks draped neatly, posture relaxed as if he'd been waiting to serve tea instead of ruin lives. A tray sat before him with 2 cups carved from bone. The liquid inside was black, bitter-smelling. He gestured politely. Sit. I didn't. He didn't mind. You were in the old mine, he said. Someone put a rock behind me. I snarled. Someone clicked at me. Someone watched while that thing tried to chew my face off. His expression didn't change. If anything, his eyes softened slightly, like a tutor watching a pupil struggle with a problem. And you escaped, he said. I didn't escape. I spat. I got aloud. That earned a faint smile, knife-thin. Approving. Good, he said. You learn quickly. Rage flared hot in my chest. I stepped forward, slammed my knife into the table hard enough to bury the tip in the wood. The fixer didn't flinch. Didn't even look down at the blade. Stop smiling, I hissed. Tell me what this is. He folded his clean hands. It is what I said it was. A plan. The crown squigs trained? I said. Not shaman nonsense. Not omens. Training. Yes. Who trained it? I demanded. He looked at me as if I'd asked which fungus grew best in whetstone. People who understand repetition. Goblins? I asked. A few, he said calmly. And others. My stomach tightened at that. Others in the dark. Rat things. Quiet knives. Networks. Airsheen whispers hanging like cobwebs. I heard your voice, I said slowly. In the mine. You told me to count proper. He didn't deny it. It was instructional, he said. Instructional, I repeated, voice dripping venom. You nearly got me eaten for instruction. I did not nearly get you eaten, he said gently. If I wished you eaten, you would be bones already. That was the worst part. He was right. I yanked my knife free and held it up, pointed at him. I want the truth, I said. All of it. Why me? Why the pits? Why tomorrow? He leaned back slightly, as if settling into a story he'd told himself many times. The pits are a gathering, he said. A convergence. War bosses, lieutenants, shaman, traders, raiders. Everyone with influence comes to Grubscab's arena tomorrow night. I know, I growled. That's why the tribe stinks extra. It is also why it is the perfect stage, he continued. A death there is public, witnessed. It becomes official. My skin crawled. You're talking about killing the war boss? Yes, he said, and took a sip of the black drink as if discussing weather. Which war boss? I asked. He tilted his head. The one who sits highest. Black Crag's ruler, war boss Grottic Ironjaw, squatting in his upper cavern like a swollen tick, fat from raids and pit profits. He wasn't the biggest goblin, but he was mean enough to make size irrelevant. Everyone paid him tribute. Even Grubscab paid him. Especially Grubscab. My throat tightened. That's suicide. It is change, the fixer corrected. Why? I demanded. What do you get from Grottic dead? The fixer set his cup down with delicate care. Order, he said simply. I barked a laugh. Order? In goblin tunnels? You want us to start lining up and washing? You mock because you cannot imagine, he said softly. But imagine you must. Black Crag sits on roots, old mine tunnels that connect to the upper passes, hidden gaps that open near human roads, smuggling paths to dwarf holds that have not yet collapsed, trade arteries. He leaned forward, eyes calm. At present, Grottig rules by appetite. He takes whatever he can, whenever he can. He raids without schedule. He taxes without structure. He kills his own underbosses for sport. That is unpredictable. Unpredictable. In goblin terms, that meant bad for business. And you, I said slowly, want predictable? Yes. Why? I pressed, though I already knew the shape of the answer. Because predictable chaos is profitable, he said. There it was. He spoke like a merchant, but the words were sharpened like a blade. With a puppet war boss, he continued, the tunnels become reliable. Raiders go out on planned routes. Smugglers pass through without being stabbed by bored guards. Tribute becomes a ledger, not a brawl. My gut twisted. A ledger, I whispered. His smile returned, small and pleased. You understand, he said. I stared at him, suddenly seeing it what he wanted Black Crag to become. Not a tribe, a machine, a counting house, a place where goblins didn't lunge and bite and scramble, but filed into roles, paid tolls, worked shifts, signed marks on parchment. A place where you could move goods through the tunnels like blood through veins, smooth and steady. It was monstrous, not because it was cruel. Black Crag was already cruel, because it was clean, because it made sense. And goblins don't survive sense, they survive mess. They survive chaos so thick no one can ever hold it long enough to strangle the rest. You don't want the crown, Squig, for the pits, I said. No, you want it as a weapon. Yes, a living knife, I muttered. A polite knife, he corrected, eyes glittering. One that does not require armies. One that does not leave a trail that can be followed. I swallowed. And you need me? I said, voice low. Because it listens to counting. He nodded once. During the arena gathering, he said, you will be positioned near the war boss dais. My stomach sank. Positioned how? He spread his hands slightly, as if presenting something obvious. You are a broker, he said. You provide squigs. You will be delivering inventory to the pits, records, counts, feeds. You will be doing your work. He leaned in. You will stand close enough for the crown squig to hear you. I felt cold spread through my ribs. And I'll count, I said, the words tasting like bile. You will count, he agreed. Quietly, professionally, as you always do. And the squig will follow my voice, I said. Yes, and it'll kill Grottig. It will remove the obstacle, he said. The careful phrasing made my skin crawl. And then what? I demanded. You think goblins will just accept it? Oh no, war boss dead. Better vote in a new one with tidy hands. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger, more like a man considering a problem. There will be violence, he admitted. Violence, I repeated, almost laughing. That's like saying the bad moon's a bit shiny. There will be a scramble, he said. But there are always scrambles. The difference is, this one will end with the correct victor. The one you pick, I said. He didn't deny it. Who? I asked, voice tight. Who's your puppet? He smiled again. A goblin with ambition and a willingness to listen. I felt my teeth grind. You're insane, I said. I am practical, he replied. Grottig's mean, I said. pacing now, unable to stand still. He's stupid and cruel, and he eats his own advisors. But he's stupid and cruel. He keeps the tribe together because everyone's afraid of him. Fear is not unity, the fixer said. It's goblin unity, I snapped. It's the only kind we got. He watched me. Patient. Do you know what happens when goblins get organized? I said, voice rising. We stop surviving. We start getting ideas. Ideas get noticed. Dwarfs notice. Humans notice. Orcs notice. Then they come down here with torches and hammers, and it's the end of us. His eyes were calm. Or it is the beginning of you. Beginning? I barked. You sound like a shaman. The word shaman made something flicker in his gaze. A brief annoyance. The shaman is useful, he said. Nothing more. That confirmed what I'd suspected. The night goblin shaman wasn't the mastermind. He was a torch. Something loud and mad to wave around while the real knife slid in. You're using him, I said. Of course. And Grubscub? I asked. The Pit King? He hesitated for the first time. Just a fraction of a breath. Grubscab likes money, he said carefully. He will like more money, so he's in on it. He is accommodating, the fixer said. My mind flashed to the clean fights, the rigged slips, the squigs reacting to clicks in the crowd. A machine. Everyone greased, everyone paid. Everyone either in on it or too stupid to notice. And then there was me, the rare goblin, who could count. The perfect trigger, the perfect scapegoat. My knife felt heavy in my hand, not like a weapon but like a weight dragging me toward the bottom. You're going to make me do it, I said quietly. If I don't, you frame me. You have summarized accurately, he said, almost pleased. Something inside me went still, not fear, not rage, a kind of clarity, sharp as a fresh blade. No, I said. The fixer blinked once. No, I won't, I said. I won't count for you. I won't be your leash. I won't be the sound that kills a war boss so you can make ledgers out of goblin lives. His smile faded. Finally, the calm remained, but the warmth drained away. You misunderstand your position, he said softly. I understand it perfect, I replied. You think because you're clean you're untouchable, but clean things stand out in muck. You're a white mushroom in a black cave. His eyes narrowed slightly. I stepped closer, knife still in hand but lowered. If Grottic dies tomorrow, I said, Black Crag doesn't become orderly. It becomes a slaughterhouse. Every underboss with a blade will go for the top. The tunnels will run so thick with blood the fungus will grow red. That is acceptable, he said, voice flat. It's not acceptable for you, I said, because in that kind of chaos, nobody controls trade routes. Nobody smuggles. Nobody makes profit. They just bite. He held my gaze, and for the first time I saw what lived behind his polite eyes. Calculation. Cold. Not goblin cold, something trained. Something that didn't belong in caves. You think I cannot adapt, he said. I think you can bleed, I said. The room went quiet. Then, softly, he sighed as if disappointed by a misbehaving servant. Very well, he said. If you refuse, you become a problem. I felt my spine chill. A problem, I echoed. A loose variable, he said, and loose variables are corrected. I tightened my grip on the knife. Try. He didn't move. Instead, he spoke softly, almost kindly. You have already been seen near the old mines. You have already asked questions in the pits. You have already bribed snotlings about hazard allowances. You are already connected to the crown, Squig, by virtue of your trade. My blood ran cold as he continued. It will be effortless, he said, to spread whispers that you trained it, that you sold it, that you intended to use it to remove Grottic and place yourself as the counting master behind the throne. I felt my stomach twist hard. Goblins didn't need proof. They needed an excuse, and I was an excuse wearing a name tag. You think you're the only one who wants me dead, I said slowly. His expression was unreadable. The shaman, I went on. He thinks it's an omen. He thinks anyone who messes with it is cursed. He'll want my head for even knowing. Grubscab if he's involved. He'll want me dead to keep his hands clean. Grottic if he hears even a whisper, he'll have my spine as a trophy. I laughed, bitter. I'm popular. The fixer's voice softened again. Then you see why cooperation is wise. I looked at him, at his clean hands, at his calm eyes, at the way he sat like violence was something that happened to other people, and I realized something that made my skin crawl worse than the crown Squig's breath. He didn't fear goblin violence. He believed he could direct it, like a counting rhythm, like a trained beast. He wanted Black Crag counted, measured, owned, and goblins don't survive ownership. Not for long. Not without biting the hand that holds the chain. No, I said again, quieter this time. Final. I'd rather die messy than live clean under you. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, from somewhere behind me, a faint scrape stone on stone. The door. Someone outside. My gut tightened. The fixer's eyes flicked past my shoulder, just briefly, then returned to me. Unfortunate, he said. In that single word was a decision, a sentence. He lifted one finger slightly, barely a gesture, and from the shadows near the wall, two shapes unfolded like dark cloth, becoming solid. Not goblins from the pits. Too quiet, too smooth, faces covered in black wraps, eyes glinting, short blades held low. The air around them felt thin, like the room had less sound in it. Eshin work, rat shadow tactics without showing the rats. I didn't wait for them to move. I threw my cup of black liquid at the lantern. It splashed, flared, and the flames sputtered violently, belching smoke. The room darkened, light turning chaotic. Shadows jumped. I lunged sideways, slamming shoulder first into the table, flipping it up. The knife men moved fast, too fast, but chaos is a goblin's friend. One blade hissed past my ear. I felt a sting, warm blood sliding down my neck. I snarled and kicked, hard, connecting with a knee. Something cracked, a muffled grunt. I bolted for the door. A hand grabbed my cloak. I spun and slashed blindly. The knife bit into cloth, maybe flesh. Someone hissed. I shoved the door open and dove into the tunnel beyond. The air outside was wet and filthy again, blessedly filthy. Fungus stink, cave gas hiss, the comforting sounds of a town that murders without finesse. Behind me, the fixer's voice floated out, calm even now. Sniv, he called softly, like we were still negotiating. You cannot outrun arithmetic. I ran anyway, because now I understood the new count of my life. 1. The fixer wanted me as a trigger. 2. The shaman would want me as a sacrifice. 3. Grubscab would want me as a loose end. 4. Grottic would want me as an example. And somewhere in the dark, the crown Squig waited, listening for numbers like a hungry prayer. Both sides wanted me dead, which meant I had only one advantage left. I could count, and I could decide where the numbers went. Chapter 5. Night of the Open Pits. By the time the pits opened, Black Crag was already screaming, not with fear, not yet, with hunger. The arena sat below the main arteries like a beating heart buried in stone, and tonight it beat fast. Every tunnel leading to it vomited bodies, goblins in patched leathers, night goblins with hoods drawn low, snotlings stacked in wobbling piles like someone had tried to build a wall out of idiots. Traders pushed through with tooth pouches held tight to their chests. Pit thugs swaggered with cudgels and chain hooks, grinning like they'd invented violence. Fungus lanterns flared in their cages overhead, casting the whole bowl of the pit in bruised reds and sickly purples. Smoke from 100 cheap torches hung under the ceiling, trapped by damp stone and the heat of bodies. It mixed with cave gas that hissed from vents in the walls, thin streams of yellow vapor that made your eyes burn and your thoughts slippery. Every few minutes, a guard would strike flint at a vent, just to make the gas bloom into a brief, roaring flame. The crowd loved it. It made them feel like the mountain itself was cheering. It also made shadows dance, and shadows are where plans live. I kept to the upper tiers, hood up, shoulders hunched, moving with the flow like a bit of debris in a fast stream. I'd smeared my face with ash and fungus paste until my features blurred into the average goblin grimace. I'd swapped my usual broker coat for a pit runner's apron, stiff with old blood. I'd even carried a clipboard board with parchment strips nailed to it because nothing makes goblins ignore you faster than paperwork. No one looks twice at the goblin holding the list. They assume he's boring or cursed. My hands still shook, not because I was scared of dying. Dying in Black Crag is like tripping. Everyone does it eventually. I was scared of being used. A few hours ago I'd been a broker with a ledger and a problem. Now I was a moving part in a machine that wanted to eat the town and spit out order. The fixer had tried to correct me like a loose sum. The shaman would happily cut my throat to make a prophecy louder. Grubscub would sell my bones as souvenirs if it improved his odds. And Warboss Grotic would laugh while I screamed, then ask someone to count how many pieces I came apart into. Tonight was the night their numbers were supposed to add up. I intended to ruin the math. Below, the war bosses gathered. You could feel it when they arrived, the way the crowd's roar changed pitch, turning from reckless joy to cautious reverence. Big goblins and orc-blooded brutes pushed through with entourages of armed lads. They wore trophies, dwarf beard rings, human scalp braids, squig jaws on necklaces. Their eyes were small and hard, the eyes of creatures who'd survived long enough to believe they deserved to. In the center tier, the warboss dais had been hammered into the rock like a parasite, a raised platform with a crude railing of welded iron. Behind it hung banners painted with crude symbols, teeth, moons, a clenched fist dripping blood. Guards stood shoulder to shoulder along the rail, blades out, eyes scanning the crowd. And at the center, on a throne of cage parts and stolen armor plates, sat Grotic Ironjaw. He looked heavier than last time I'd seen him, not fat, dense, like a lump of spite wrapped in iron. His jaw was plated with riveted metal that had been hammered into place around broken teeth, giving him a permanent grin. A crown of jagged fangs sat atop his head, and around his neck hung a chain of finger bones, each one carved with a tally mark. He liked counting too, Grotic, just not the same way I did. Grubscab the Pit King strutted onto the arena floor with a hooked pole in one hand and a goblet of fungus beer in the other. He bowed low to Grotic, too low too long, then sprang back up with a grin wide enough to split his face. "Welcome, you filth," Grubscab roared, voice amplified by some crude horn contraption that made it echo through the cavern. "Welcome to da open pits, where da strong get stronger and da weak get eaten in front da everyone." The crowd howled. Teeth flew into the air in handfuls, thrown like confetti. The arena floor became a glittering carpet of currency. "Tonight," Grubscab shouted, "we got something special. Something Bad Moon blessed." At that, a murmur rolled through the audience. Bad Moon, omen. People leaned forward despite themselves. That was when the shaman appeared. He came out from a tunnel mouth draped in black fungus cloth, flanked by hooded night goblins carrying bone chimes and smoking censers. He was small, even for a goblin, but his presence made the air feel wrong. His robes were stitched with crescent symbols, and his hood shadowed his face except for 2 eyes that gleamed like wet stones. In his hands he carried a staff, topped with a squig skull that had been lacquered white like the crown squig's eyes. He raised the staff, and the chimes jingled. The crowd quieted in a wave, not because they respected him, but because everyone knew what happened when a shaman got ignored. The shaman began to chant. It wasn't words, not really. More like a series of guttural croaks and hissed syllables that scraped against the mind. The bone chimes answered, rattling in rhythms that felt half random, half deliberate. Smoke poured from the censers, thick and sweet, curling into shapes that made my stomach turn if I stared too long. The glow mold on the arena walls seemed brighter, or maybe that was just my fear. Then cave gas flared. A guard struck flint at a vent high on the wall. Yellow vapor ignited in a booming whoosh, a flame tongue licking across the cavern ceiling. The heat washed over the crowd, and for a moment everything was lit in harsh gold. In that brief, bright flare, I saw him, the clean-handed fixer, not in his neat room, not behind a table, here, in the crowd, halfway down the tiers, positioned like a spider in its web, dark silks disguised under a rough cloak, but the hands Sigmar's rotting mercy, those hands were still clean. Even among filth, they gleamed like an insult. He wasn't watching the shaman. He was watching the war boss dais, watching for the moment. His eyes flicked once toward the arena gate, and I knew the crown squig was coming. My mouth went dry. My tongue wanted to count on its own, like an itch. I bit it hard enough to taste blood. Below, the shaman's chant reached a fever pitch. He slammed his staff onto the stone floor. The bone chimes stopped. Silence hit the arena like a slammed door. Then, from the main beast tunnel, a cage rolled out, not dragged by snotlings like the usual ones. This was pushed by 4 thick-armed handlers in chained masks, their movements measured and tense. The cage itself was different, woven fungus rope hardened with resin, exactly like the one in the mine chamber. The door was reinforced with iron braces. The whole thing pulsed faintly with glow mold symbols smeared across it. Bad Moon glyphs. The crowd breathed in as one. The handlers stopped at the center of the arena and backed away fast, pole hooks ready. The shaman lifted his staff. "Behold!" he shrieked, voice suddenly clear through the cavern. "Da crown o' the moon, da tooth o' the sky, da bite what bites twice." The crowd roared again, louder now, hungry and terrified in equal measure. Grubscab laughed so hard he nearly dropped his goblet. Grottic leaned forward, eyes gleaming. The shaman snapped his fingers. The cage door creaked open. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the crown squig slid out like a nightmare being born. White eyes, purple gums, body thick as a boulder squig. It moved low to the ground, muscles rippling under mottled hide. Saliva streamed from its mouth in long ropes, glistening under fungus light. Its jaw flexed once, snap, then again sideways, offset like reality itself had been bitten. Snap! The sound made the front row flinch, involuntarily. The crown squig didn't charge. That was the first wrong thing. Squigs charge. They are hunger with legs. They are chaos in meat form. This one stepped into the arena, stopped, and lifted its head slowly. It looked around, not with dumb animals scanning, with listening. The crowd's roar faltered, confused by the creature's stillness. A few goblins shouted taunts. Someone threw a tooth. Someone else threw a snotling, because goblins do that when they're bored. The snotling hit the arena floor with a wet slap and tried to scramble away. The crown squig didn't even glance at it. It stood perfectly still, waiting, listening. My heart hammered hard enough to hurt, because I knew what it was waiting for. A rhythm, a clean sequence, counting on the tears. The fixer's head dipped slightly. His hand rose near his mouth. I couldn't hear it over the crowd, but I saw his jaw move. Click! The crown squig's body tensed. Its white eyes snapped toward the tears, toward him, toward the war boss dais beyond. The crowd didn't notice. They thought it was tracking prey. I felt cold spread through my ribs. This was it. If it heard a clean count near Grottic, it would move like a guided blade. It would carve through the arena like a thrown axe, ignoring everything except the sound, and they'd blame me for training it. They'd tear me apart while the new order got built over my bones. I didn't think. Thinking is slow. Survival is fast. I opened my mouth and broke the pattern. 7, I shouted, too loud voice cracking. No 12. No 5. 5. 5. 5. Heads turned. Goblins glared. A pit guard started to shove toward me. I didn't stop. 23. 9. 1. 10. 4. 6. 6. 6. I made the numbers ugly. I repeated. I stumbled. I changed rhythm mid-shout. I spat nonsense counts like a drunk snotling trying to do sums. The crown squig's head snapped toward me. It froze. I kept going. Louder. More chaotic. 8. 2. 90. 14. 10. 10. 1. 1. 17. The crowd roared in anger now, thinking I was heckling the ritual or insulting the shaman. Someone threw a cup at me. Fungus beer splashed my apron. The crown squig twitched violently, like a beast hearing too many masters at once. Its body jerked left, then right, white eyes flashing. The jaw snapped twice in rapid succession, the second bite gouging a line out of the arena floor as if stone were soft. The shaman screeched in outrage. "Stop that! Stop that counting!" "Good." I shouted harder. 3, 3, 12, 6, 2, 11, 1, 8. The crown squig shook its head, confused. It took one step, then another, then suddenly lurched forward, not toward Grottic, toward the nearest moving thing. The snotling it had ignored before was still scrambling. The crown squig snapped once, missed, and the second bite landed in a spot slightly to the left, catching the snotling's whole torso as if space had shifted. The snotling came apart in one wet, horrifying jerk. Blood sprayed in a fan across the arena floor. The crowd screamed, then cheered, because goblins can't decide whether horror is bad or entertaining, so they treat it as both. The crown squig didn't pause. It went berserk. My broken numbers had scrambled its training. The clean pattern had been drowned in noise. Now it was pure hunger again, except smarter. directionless but furious, like a knife thrown into a bag of rats. It charged into the handlers. One swung a pole hook. The crown squig bit the hook in half with the first snap. The second snap took the handler's head off. The head didn't fall where it should have. It landed a foot to the side, as if the bite had reached into a slightly different place in the world and yanked. Panic erupted. Pit guards rushed in, shouting, swinging chains. The crown squig tore through them. Bodies flew. Blood slicked the floor. Teeth clattered across stone like hail. Grubscab was still laughing until the squig's wild path curved toward him. The Pit King tried to scramble back, slipping in spilled beer. His grin collapsed into a shocked, stupid "Oh." "No, no, no," he began. The crown squig hit him like a boulder. First bite. It clamped down on his shoulder, crushing leather and bone with a sound like cracking timber. Second bite. It snapped again, offset, and somehow caught his throat as well, tearing out a chunk of neck that shouldn't have been reachable. Grubscab's laugh turned into a wet gargle. He flailed, hands scrabbling at the squig's gums, fingers sliding in blood. Then he stopped moving. The crowd went silent. Even goblins know when the show has become real. Up on the dais, Grottic rose halfway from his throne, roaring something furious. His guards tightened formation, blades out, trying to look brave, while their eyes betrayed them. The shaman shrieked louder, chant turning frantic. Smoke poured from his sensors in thick coils. He raised his staff and screamed at the bad moon like it owed him money. The air in front of him tore. That's what it looked like cloth ripping. A horror pushed through. Not a daemon proper, Sigmar save us, but something close enough. A hunched thing of shadow and fungus, limbs too long, fingers ending in hooks of bone. Its mouth was a ragged hole full of teeth that looked grown rather than arranged. It writhed with wrongness, dripping black slime that hissed where it hit the stone. The crowd screamed. The shaman cackled, triumphant and mad. "See! The moon sends me help!" The horror lunged toward the crown squig. For a heartbeat, it looked like the shaman might regain control. Then the crown squig snapped. First bite, it clamped onto the horror's arm, teeth sinking into shadow stuff like it was meat. Second bite. It snapped again, offset, and somehow caught the horror's head, ripping it sideways out of its own body. The horror convulsed, shrieked, and dissolved into a spray of black slime and glowing mold. The shaman's triumphant cackle died in his throat. He stared at the mess where his help had been, eyes wide, mouth working silently. The crown squig turned toward him. The shaman tried to run. He got 3 steps. The first bite took his staff, snapping it clean in half. The second bite took his leg off at the knee. But the leg didn't fall where it should have. It disappeared for a heartbeat, then reappeared a foot away, twitching like it had teleported in panic. The shaman screamed, high and thin, and collapsed. The crown squig bit him once more, then twice. Then there was nothing left to scream. All across the arena, goblins surged toward exits, trampling each other in blind panic. Snotlings vanished under boots. Pit guards tried to form lines and failed. Someone lit a gas vent in desperation, and the flame whooshed down, scorching the nearest tier and setting a patch of fungus cloth on fire. Chaos. Beautiful, bloody chaos. Somewhere in it, I saw the clean-handed fixer moving. He wasn't running like the others. He was slipping smooth, controlled, gliding along the tier edges toward an escape tunnel. His head was lowered, cloak pulled tight, clean hands hidden now. He'd lost control of the squig. His polite knife had become a butcher's cleaver in a crowded room, and now he wanted out. I felt a cold focus settle in me. If he escaped, he'd still frame me. He'd still whisper. He'd still send knives. He'd try again, with a new plan and cleaner numbers. I couldn't let him, but I also couldn't fight him. Not with blades, not with strength, only with what I had, counting. The crowned Squig was in the center of the arena now, head swinging, white eyes scanning the tiers, confused by the storm of sound. It snapped at anything that came too close. Its body was slick with blood, gums purple and gleaming, jaw flexing like it was eager to bite the world in half. I moved down the steps, close enough to be heard, but not close enough to be eaten. Goblins shoved past me, screaming, but I kept going, every instinct yelling to flee, and every number in my head saying this was the only chance. The fixer reached the tunnel mouth. He glanced back once. His eyes met mine across the chaos. For the first time, his calm slipped, just a fraction. He knew what I was about to do. I inhaled, and I counted properly. Not chaotic, not broken, not sloppy. Clean, controlled, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the noise like a blade through cloth. 1, 2, 3, 4. I tapped my teeth lightly with my tongue to make the rhythm crisp. The crown Squig froze. Its white eyes snapped toward me instantly. Its whole body tensed, like a hunting beast hearing a whistle. I kept counting, steady, each number a hook. 5, 6, 7. The Squig turned, not toward the war boss dais, toward the escape tunnel, toward the fixer. The fixer's head snapped up. He tried to vanish into the tunnel. Too late. 8, 9, 10. The crown Squig moved. It didn't charge blindly now. It ran with purpose, guided by the clean rhythm like a leash pulled tight. The fixer disappeared into the tunnel mouth. The crown Squig followed, squeezing into the narrow opening with shocking ease, its body compressing like a muscle-bound nightmare. Its jaw snapped once against the stone edge, gouging rock. Then it vanished into the dark. After him, the tunnel swallowed both. The arena was still chaos, people fleeing, fires burning, war boss guards shouting, but the centerpiece of the horror was gone, dragged into the veins of Black Crag. I stopped counting instantly. My breath came out ragged. My throat burned. Around me, the pits were a slaughterhouse. Grubscab lay dead in a spreading pool. The shaman was meat. Grottic's guards were scrambling to form a retreat. The crowd was tearing itself apart in panic, trampling, stabbing, biting in the crush. No politku, no tidy regime change, no clean transfer of power, just goblins being goblins. Mess, blood, teeth everywhere. And somewhere in the tunnels, a living weapon chased a clean-handed man into the dark. The future of Black Crag wasn't counted anymore. It was spilled. Chapter 6. Balanced Books. Dawn doesn't rise in Black Crag. It lakes. A pale, sour light creeps down through cracks in the upper stone where the world above remembers it as a sky. It dribbles into the highest caverns, then down through vent shafts and old mine chimneys, thinning as it goes, turning into a weak grey smear that never quite reaches the deep places. But even down where the pits sit, you can feel when morning happens. The screams change. Night screams are entertainment drunk rage, gambling fights, pit cheers, Squig shrieks, someone getting stabbed because someone else smiled wrong. Morning screams are accounting. They're the sound of people discovering what the night cost. I walked through them, my boots stuck to the tunnel floor. Blood dries fast when the air is full of cave gas and heat, turning slick into tacky like spilled resin. Every step pulled at me as if the stone wanted a share. The air smelled like smoke, bile, fungus, beer, and that metallic bite that means bodies are cooling nearby. Behind me, somewhere deeper, the arena still roared with disorder, not cheering now, brawling. Revenge, scramble, the inevitable goblin morning after. I didn't go back. I couldn't. The pits had eaten their own last night. The pit king was a broken doll in a pool of his own laughter. The shaman was a smear the scrubbers would never fully remove. Half the pit leadership handlers, bookies, guards, the clever little backroom cutters who made sure bets went the right way, were either dead, missing, or hiding under rocks praying the wrong god didn't notice them. And the crown squig? The crown squig had vanished into the tunnels like a bad thought you can't swallow. Some said it dragged the clean-handed fixer apart in that escape passage, leaving only silk strips and neat slices of meat. Some said it didn't catch him at all, that he slipped through a side crack like smoke and left the squig to chew shadows. Some said the squig bit him twice, once here and once somewhere else, and that's why no one found a body. Goblins love stories most when they can't be proven. I wasn't going to help them. I kept my hood up and my head down as I moved through the arteries of Black Crag. Snotlings scurried past, carrying buckets and mops, their faces pinched with exhausted terror. They walked like workers for once, not like pests. Every few yards a goblin lay slumped against the wall, breathing shallow, eyes wide, hands stained. Survivors with no idea what to do next except bleed quietly. At a junction tunnel I nearly stepped over a severed forearm still wearing a pit guard bracer. The fingers were clenched around 3 teeth so tight the knuckles were white. Currency held through death. That's commitment. I passed 2 goblins arguing over a corpse. He owes me 5 teeth. He owes me 4. You can't owe 4. You get? It's 5. It's 4, if you don't count our little one. They stared at the corpse's mouth, counting teeth that weren't there anymore. I didn't stop. If you stop to watch goblins argue, you become the next argument. The upper tunnels were worse. Not bloodier, just meaner. That's where Grotix lads had retreated with their wounded pride and their wounded war boss. That's where they decided the night needed a culprit, a scapegoat, a name, a counting goblin with a ledger and a reputation. Me. I felt it in the way the tunnels watched, in the sudden hush when I passed certain corners, in the way groups stopped talking when my shadow touched theirs. The town didn't know what happened last night, but it knew something had happened, and goblins don't like not knowing. It makes them itch, so they scratch with knives. I turned down a service passage that only brokers and cage haulers used, ducking through a curtain of fungus cloth, stiff with grime. It led back toward my office, my den, my safe little hole full of numbers and paper and illusions of control. When I saw the door, intact and closed, relief hit me hard enough to make my knees weak. Then I saw the mark, a fresh scratch on the timber, carved with a crude crescent moon and 3 tally lines beneath it. Bad moon glyph, a warning, or a claim. Someone had been here. Maybe the shaman survivors, if any had survived. Maybe Grotix lads. Maybe the fixers' shadow men, if they still had a master. Or maybe the tunnels themselves had learned to write. I didn't hesitate. Hesitation is a luxury for creatures with backup. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The familiar stink of parchment, ink, and squig feed hit me like an old insult. My office was small, cramped, walls plastered in ledger scraps and transaction tallies, cages stacked in the corner, empty now, chains hanging like dead snakes. My desk sat where I'd left it, the ledger open to last night's entries. 79 teeth, advance payment, crown squig job, I stared at that line for a long time. It looked harmless written down, like numbers always do. Then I heard a faint sound from the back corner, a soft scuttle. I whipped my knife out, spine tight, ready to stab whatever shadow had decided my office was a nice place to die. A snotling stood there, trembling, eyes huge. It held a small sack in both hands like an offering. "Sniv?" it squeaked. I recognized it, Scab, my three-fingered runner. "You're alive," I said. He nodded so hard his ears flapped. "Mostly." I lowered the knife slightly. "What are you doing here?" He held up the sack. "Hazard mushrooms." I blinked. "What?" Scab swallowed. Union says, if we don't get hazard mushrooms now, we don't haul no cages. Not ever. We go on stoppage. We just sit." The idea of Snotling sitting still was almost funny enough to kill me. Almost. I rubbed my face, smearing ash and dried blood. My fingers came away black. "Who told you to bring me mushrooms?" Scab hesitated. "Tall Snotling. Name, Muck." "He says you promised." I had promised. In a moment of bribery, I'd promised the impossible. Now the impossible stood in my office holding a sack of fungus caps. I stared at it. Then at my ledgers. Then at the door mark. The town was shifting. Teeth were moving. Debts were being rewritten in blood. If I didn't move with it, I'd get crushed under it. "Put it there," I said, pointing at the desk. Scab set the sack down carefully, like it might explode. I reached into my tooth pouch, pulled out a handful more than I'd planned to ever give a Snotling, and tossed it to him. Scab caught it against his chest and almost sobbed. "Hazard mushroom allowance," I said. "It's real now. You tell Muck. You tell all of 'em. They haul cages for me when I call it, and they don't talk about me to anyone, ever." Scab nodded so fast I worried his neck would snap. "Yes, boss. Yes, Sniv. We don't talk. We just haul." He scuttled out, teeth clacking in his pouch like a happy rattle. I locked the door behind him and stood alone with my ledgers. The ledger was my life. It was proof I existed, proof I mattered, proof I was useful. It was also proof of every deal, every bribe, every illicit sale, every squig moved through tunnels that didn't officially exist. Proof that Grottic could use to hang me. Proof that the Fixer could twist. Proof that any war boss could interpret into a reason to stab me and call it justice. And after last night, proof was a death sentence. I stared at the columns of ink and numbers until the letters blurred. Then I made a decision. I pulled every ledger off the shelves. 3 thick books, parchment swollen with damp, edges stained with old blood from careless fingers. I piled them in the center of the room. I gathered the loose scraps from the walls, transaction lists, delivery notes, dead tallies, tiny careful counts that had made me feel safe. I ripped them down, nails and all, until the walls were bare stone again. My hands moved fast, almost frantic. Not because I was panicking, because I was doing something I'd never allowed myself to do before, erasing. When the pile was big enough to look like a squat paper altar, I took a lantern from its hook and smashed it onto the floor beside it. Fungus oil splashed, sticky and smelling of rot. I struck flint. The flame caught with a hungry hiss. Paper curls first, then it blackens, then it eats itself. Ink turns to smoke. Numbers become nothing. The fire lit my office with harsh orange, making the shadows on the walls leap like frantic goblins. Heat pushed back the damp for a moment, and the smell of burning parchment filled my lungs until I coughed. I watched the ledgers burn, not with sadness, with relief so sharp it hurt. Pending structural adjustments, I muttered to myself, the words tasting strange, like something the fixer would say, like something clean. But I was going to use clean words for filthy survival. When the last ledger spine collapsed into glowing embers, I kicked the pile, scattering ash across the floor. Balanced books, no books left to balance. A knock came at my door, hard, impatient. I froze, knife in hand. Another knock. Sniv, a voice barked, a goblin voice, rough and angry. Open up! War boss wants words! My stomach tightened. Chrotuk's lots. Already. I glanced at the ash on the floor, the smoke still clinging to the ceiling, the mark on the door outside, the sack of hazard mushrooms on the desk like some absurd offering. I wiped soot across my face, making myself look more like a pit runner and less like a broker. I shoved the knife into my belt and opened the door just enough to show my teeth. 2 goblins stood outside, both armed, both wearing Grottek's crude iron jaw emblem on their chest plates. One had a crossbow, the other had a hooked spear still sticky with something dark. Their eyes flicked past me into the room, noticing the smoke. What you burnin'? The crossbow one demanded. Old contracts, I said. Bad luck. After last night, the spear one spat. Last night was your fault, they say. They say lots, I replied, keeping my voice flat. Crossbow goblin leaned closer, sniffing. Boss wants you at the upper hall. Now. I'm closed, I said. He blinked. What? Brokerage suspended, I said, lifting my chin slightly. Pending structural adjustments. The words sounded ridiculous coming out of my mouth. They sounded even more ridiculous to the goblins. Confusion wrinkled their faces like dried fungus. Boss don't care if you're structural, the spear goblin snarled. Boss wants answers. I held their gaze and let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I did the only thing goblins respect more than threats. I offered a deal. I ain't got answers, I said. I got squigs. I got cages. I got handlers who won't haul a thing without hazard mushrooms now. And I got roots. If Grottek wants pits running again, he needs cages moved. If he wants raids, he needs beasts. If he wants to keep war bosses from sniffing weakness, he needs the tunnels quiet. The crossbow goblin's eyes narrowed. He didn't like hearing sense. Sense felt like a trap. And you want? He asked. I want to not be stabbed for something that happened in a pit full of stabbing, I said. I want time. The spear goblin shifted, impatient. Boss, don't give time. He will, I said. If you tell him this, Crown Squig's gone. Grubscab's dead. Shaman's dead. Half the pit crew's dead. If Grottek starts swinging at every goblin with a ledger, he'll end up ruling a tunnel full of corpses and nobody to count his tribute. They stared. Behind them, the tunnel seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the crossbow goblin spat. You come anyway. I smiled, not wide, not friendly, just enough to show I still had teeth. I'll come, I said. Later, when I've adjusted. They grumbled but backed off, not entirely satisfied, not entirely sure what they'd just been told. I shut the door and locked it. Then I waited. Not long. You don't wait long in a town that's deciding who to blame. I slipped out through the back service passage, one only my runners used, and moved through the tight worm tunnels under the office, where the walls were close enough to scrape your shoulders and the fungus grew in pale threads like spider webs. This was my true root network, the broker's veins, the places you went when you didn't want to be followed by anyone taller than a snotling. I emerged near the mushroom farms Again, there, a line of snotlings sat in a row. Actually sat, their little legs crossed, their hands folded, their faces set in stubborn, grim determination. It was unnatural. It was horrifying. It was beautiful. Muck the tall one, tall for a snotling, anyway, stood in front of them with a crude stick like a union staff. He saw me, and his eyes widened. "You," he hissed. "We waitin'." I tossed him the sack of hazard mushrooms. It landed in his arms, and he hugged it like treasure. "Allowance is paid," I said. "You tell 'em it's official." The snotlings erupted into squeaky cheers and immediately began stuffing mushrooms into their mouths. Muck wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "We haul cages now?" "You haul cages when I say," I replied. Muck nodded solemnly, as if swearing an oath. "Good," I said. "Now listen. If anyone asks where I went, you saw nothing." Muck blinked. "We always see nothing. We snotlings." I almost laughed. Almost. I moved on, deeper into the tunnels where the air was cooler and the noise of the main caverns faded. Here, Black Crag began to settle not into peace, but into a new shape of violence. Goblins fought in side passages, quick stabbings over territory left vacant by dead pit bosses. Small gangs clashed, then merged, then broke again. Someone had painted over the shamans' glyphs with cruder symbols, teeth, and insults, trying to reclaim the walls from prophecy. Grottic survived, but not cleanly. Word traveled in scraps. He'd been knocked down in the crush, trampled, his jaw plate dented. He'd lost 2 guards and 1 favorite underboss. He'd retreated to the upper hall with a limp and a rage that made the tunnels tremble. He was weakened, and every goblin in Black Crag could smell it. That was the tribe stabilizing, not by agreements, by everyone stabbing until they were too tired to stab more, violent enough to reset balance. No one knew who had truly controlled the crown squig. That was the best part. The shaman was dead, so his story didn't matter anymore. Grubscab was dead, so his deals didn't matter anymore. The fixer, maybe dead, maybe vanished, had left no obvious fingerprints. And me? I'd burned the proof. All that remained was rumor, and rumors are the only currency goblins trust more than teeth. I found a quiet alcove beneath an old cart track and sat for a moment, back against stone, breathing shallow. My hands were black with ash. My throat was raw from shouting numbers. My ears still rang with the sound of snapping jaws. I closed my eyes. In my mind, the rhythm played again. Click, click, click. Pause, click. The clean pattern. The leash. I hadn't meant to memorize it. But you don't choose what fear carves into you. I could still feel it in my tongue, the way the clicks formed behind teeth. The exact spacing, the structure that made the crown squig turn its head like a dog hearing its master. I opened my eyes. The tunnel ahead was empty, but emptiness in Black Crag isn't safety. It's just space waiting to be filled. Somewhere far below, deeper than the mines, deeper than the fungus farms, something moved. A distant scrape. A faint, wet snap. Maybe a rock shifting. Maybe a squig biting stone. Maybe a living weapon listening in the dark for the next clean count. I sat very still and let the thought settle. I had burned my books. I had paid the snotlings. I had ruined a coup. I had turned a polite knife into a messy one. And now, in the soot-black spaces where my ledgers used to live, there was only one account left to keep. May own. In Black Crag, everybody counts. Some of us just know what the numbers mean.